Fly about evolution deals with the myth surrounding what's called natural selection and random mutations. And here's the heart of the issue. Evolutionists say the human eye was formed due to random mutation that occurred in one of the first fish. Could have come from, they say, a sunspot or some similar blemish. And that blemish evolved over time through natural selection. The fish with the best chance of survival mated with the other mutant spot fish. That's known as survival of the fittest. And eventually, the spot grew and evolved into the human eye as we know it today. To the average person, that sounds reasonably plausible. In fact, many scientists seem to accept it on face value because it sounds so good. And it does sound plausible, at least until you stop to think it through. Well, Wernher von Braun, the genius who started the U.S. space program, was director of NASA and did just that. He thought it through. And when he did, it only increased his high regard for his creator.
The idea of creation is not conceivable without invoking the necessity of design. One cannot be exposed to the law and order of the universe without concluding that there must be design and purpose behind it all. To be forced to believe only one conclusion, that everything in the universe happened by chance, would violate the very objectivity of science itself. What random process could produce the brain of a man or the system of the human eye? Wernher von Braun, founder of the U.S. space program and former director of NASA.
And that's the question I want to focus your attention on for a moment. How is it that evolutionists and many others have never stopped long enough to really consider what they're choosing to believe is that the human eye developed over time by random chance? There are countless ways to show you just how absurd the theory is that suggests that random chance mutations evolving over time could actually account for the development of the human eye. But let me give you just two. A quote from Charles Darwin himself. He admitted the eye was a challenge to his theory. Darwin wrote,
"To suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus to different distances, for admitting different amounts of light, could have been formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest degree."
anyone who's actually a scientist would never believe in the creation model of human life described in the Bible over Darwin's theory of evolution.
I've spent all day at zoos getting photographs of rear ends of elephants and hippopotami.
I'm now so old, my pussy is haunted.
Secondly, to give you just a very small idea of how ridiculous it is that most evolutionists believe the eye was a mutation that somehow developed over time into the complex thing that it is today.
It's impossible for the eye to evolve by chance or mutations, because everything would have had to have evolved at the same time, which suddenly functioned in perfect harmony. For the eye to function, it must be clean and moist with tear glands and movable eyelids. The cornea has to be transparent to allow light to pass through it to the pupil. A lens then adjusts and focuses the image on the back of the retina, where 130 million light-sensitive rods and cones transform the light into electrical impulses. Those impulses go to the brain, and we see an image. The eye either functions as a whole or not at all. It is either perfect or perfectly useless.
But the mathematical odds that the lens and the retina and the tear ducts and the optic nerve and the cornea and literally countless number of other supporting parts all randomly formed at exactly the right place on the body, exactly the right relationship within the eye, at exactly the same time as all the other parts, defies human reason. To suggest that such a complex array of perfectly functioning parts accidentally appeared all at once is truly absurd to the highest degree, to use Darwin's own words. Well, you say, evolution doesn't claim it all happened at once. According to the evolutionary model, all this took place over millions of years. And get this, not just one of these amazing evolutionary string of coincidences occurred, but two eyes, formed perfectly right next to each other, and all by accident, of course.
It's hard to accept the evolution of the human eye as a product of chance. It's even harder to accept the evolution of human intelligence as the product of random disruptions of brain cells in our ancestors. Robert Jastrow, astronomer and geologist, founder of NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies.
But the wombat is intriguing. It's also a marsupial. It has a pouch. But the intriguing thing about the wombat is that its pouch faces backwards, and so the young have to jump in at the rear end. Now you might wonder, why is that so? Well, if a wombat tunnels under the ground, you can imagine what would happen if its pouch faced forward. It would fill up with dirt and you get fossilized wombats real quickly. I remember taking a group of American tourists to one of my favorite parks in Australia where the park ranger was giving a talk about the wombat. And he said, isn't evolution wonderful? Over millions of years it slowly turned that pouch around. And one of my tourists put up his hand and said, excuse me, sir, what was happening in the millions of years while it was still turning around? And the park ranger had this funny look in his face and didn't know what to say.
That all the adaptive structures in nature, all the organisms which have existed throughout history, were generated by the accumulation of entirely undirected mutations, that is, an entirely unsubstantiated belief, which there is not the slightest evidence whatsoever.
The truth is, our human bodies are far too complex to have slowly evolved. Parts of the body, like the eye, can only function because everything was created at the same time by an intelligent designer, God.